Hi, I want to thank you in advance for taking the time to view this video. The purpose of this video is to get justice for our son, Paul Robinson Jr., who was struck by a car on November 3rd of 2015 as he was returning home. He was 3 blocks from home when this happened. He was hit from behind by a car. It was between 8:30 and 8:40 p.m. The road was dark. There were no street lights. Records will show from the report, the accident report by the Sheriff's Department, that the driver was speeding. It was documented as between 41 and 51 miles per hour. The speed limit was 40. The speed was determined by calculation to be 51, but as you'll see from the evidence, the Sheriff's Department intention was to minimize the responsibility of this driver. It had been raining, it was overcast, and there is responsibility on this driver for this incident, and there were no tickets or charges brought against this driver, and that's unacceptable. At the time, the Maricopa Sheriff was Joe Arpaio. Many of you have heard of him, most recently being pardoned by President Trump here in Phoenix, Arizona. Our major concern in this case was the fact that this driver was not held accountable for the injuries to PJ. And no one has acknowledged first that who it was that got hit. In the brief article in the media only said a driver of a bike, and never later come back to name PJ specifically. Contacting the county attorney's office, there was no response. They wouldn't acknowledge us, wouldn't come out and speak with us. Sheriff's Department, contact with them initially, they indicated that they were informed that Paul Jr. had suffered an internal decapitation, which we found out was incorrect. I don't know where they got that from. I met with them on the 10th of November. Their accident report would later say that PJ died the day before, which was incorrect. At that meeting, they attempted to lead me to believe, they wanted me to believe, that PJ was at fault. I call him PJ, Paul Jr., that's what we always called him. They wanted me to believe that he was at fault for being in the middle of the road, that he was riding a bike without reflectors on it. He was wearing dark clothes. Both of those things are false. I recall asking them if those things represented a death sentence in Arizona. At the end of their report, they referred to this matter as exceptionally clear. From the Arizona Department of Public Safety, let me give you an idea of how they define clearance. An offense is considered clear or solved when at least one offender is arrested for a crime, even though several may have been involved. Offenses may also be cleared by exceptional means when the offender commits suicide, makes a dying declaration, confesses while in custody or serving time for another crime, is prosecuted in another jurisdiction for the same offense, is a juvenile, or when the victim refuses to prosecute or another jurisdiction refuses to extradite the offender. Now let me give you another idea of what clearance is from an article that was written in 2008, and it was from an investigation by an organization called the Goldwater Group, whose origin goes back to the late Senator Barry Goldwater. In police terms, you can clear a case by either arresting the perpetrator or through exception, stating you're aware of who the suspect is by special circumstances, make an arrest impossible, i.e. the suspect is dead. For 80 years, the FBI has had rigid rules on what is deemed as an exception. Never has it allowed an agency to claim an exception simply because it was too lazy to solve tough crimes. In this case, our greatest concern is, and it was insulting, that they would say that this matter was exceptionally cleared when they brought no charges against the driver of this vehicle. Let me start by showing you the evidence pictures taken by Maricopa County Sheriff's Department photographer. Now, it's our belief that the intent of taking these photographs, especially when a person is critically injured, and they would even categorize it as a fatality, in the end it was, but the circumstances require a greater explanation because it also involves the treatment in the hospital. However, where this part of the matter is concerned, when this road was closed off by the Phoenix Police Department that arrived first, they closed off the eastbound lane, the westbound lane, and adjacent roads. This was a closed crime scene, and the intent is to preserve evidence. The belief is things are the way they were when you first walk up to the scene. You can't speak to things that took place before you arrived, but after that scene is closed off, the intent is to preserve evidence. I'm going to zoom in here so we can start taking a look at some of these photographs. Now this is looking westbound on Lower Buckeye Road. As you can see, it was dark that night. I'm going to zoom in a little more, and when you look at this area here, you can see the beginning of Phoenix again by the street lights. In this 3-block area that's unincorporated, there are no street lights, so the area was dark. Again, you can see how dark it was, but you can also see here, and I want you to take notice of the street lights, and as you go further west, it continues to be well lit by these street lights. Also, I want to bring to your attention, this is a turn lane, and what you can see here is this would be the center line, and on this side here there is a bike lane, and that bike lane ends approximately in this area here, and as this goes further down the road, it combines to be a center lane and a non-passing designation by the solid yellow lines. Now, this picture is significant for the fact that the accident took place further down the road, just past this power line here, east of this photograph. This vehicle here is a vehicle that we believe to have been a friend of the driver. Now, a family, the Gonzaleses, Mr. and Mrs., came out immediately after the accident. They lived next to the yard that I'll show you where this vehicle went through the wall and flipped over. Mrs. Gonzalez indicated that she had just came in the house and it had been raining off and on. It was overcast. It was dark. So when she came out and her husband, and they went to console PJ in the middle of the road along with a nurse that was coming the opposite direction and who was potentially a witness that was never interviewed. They indicated that some individuals came up to the vehicle and were arguing with the homeowners. This is the yard that the car ended up in. They indicated that these individuals were consoling the driver and arguing with the homeowner. We would later find out that these were family members of the driver. Now, the officer that ended up being assigned to the case, his supervisor was a Sergeant Blaine, and according to the incident report, the officer states, Sergeant Blaine, who was his immediate supervisor, said the driver of vehicle 2, which is the driver of the car, was complaining of knee pain but had refused medical treatment at the scene. He also refused to be transported to the hospital. And as often is the case, people are aware that if they get transported to the hospital and have been involved in an accident, part of the hospital protocol is to do a urine drug screen. In his attempt to avoid this, he simply stated, my mother will take me. So this detective went on to say that the driver was still on the scene and was seated in a vehicle that belonged to a friend. It is our belief that this is the friend whose vehicle you see here at the far end of this scene. Now, other photographs are going to show this vehicle not being there. And it is our belief or our concern as to whether or not this vehicle reflects the return of this driver to the scene, or the driver simply walked up the road and got into this vehicle. It goes without saying that when you go to a scene, a person has hit an individual, a pedestrian, a person on a bike, that person is potentially liable for possibly vehicular manslaughter, something of that nature. That's the whole point of the investigation. So until that can be properly ruled out, that person, it's our belief, and I believe research will show, that that person would be frisked to make sure that they don't have any weapons on them, also to determine if they have any drugs, paraphernalia, anything of that nature, and then they're placed in a squad car until the time in which they can get a better idea of the scene, the circumstances of the accident, and in a case of a drug recognition expert being called until that individual arrives so that he can perform his duties. To see this individual, now this is the sheriff walking up to the vehicle. Here's the sheriff walking away from him with the vehicle, from the vehicle. Now we find that unusual and strange. I spoke to a Phoenix police officer that indicated as well that that is highly unusual. Now the next picture continues to show him taking him across the street. In speaking with the Gonzalez's, they indicated that they stayed outside till close to midnight. And it appeared to them that it took hours, at least 2 hours, before they seen anything that looked like a test to determine if a person was impaired. Now, there is no record of a breathalyzer. And the record indicates that a drug recognition expert was called. Now, drug recognition experts are people that are considered specialists in determining if a person is impaired. Now, I went online to research what a drug recognition expert is, what their protocols are. There's a national organization that kind of determines these protocols. And I spoke with one of their representatives, and they happen to know the individual who was quoted as being the drug recognition expert that was called. They also indicated that drug recognition experts in Arizona are trained in phlebotomy. That's the process of drawing blood. Now, in their 12-step protocol, it also indicates that these drug recognition experts usually transport these individuals to police stations or to other areas, departments, what have you, where they can perform these tests in a proper manner. And those tests include breathalyzer and blood or urine, along with the checking of vital signs and interrogation, checking memory and things of that nature. But it is usually not done at the scene. It would be difficult to perform these protocols on the scene. So, what the records show is that though it's indicated that this drug recognition expert was called, there is no indication that he showed up. Only a statement by this detective that was assigned this investigation that he performed his duties and he was found not to be impaired. However, if this individual did all of this testing should be reflected in documentation that would be in this Sheriff's Department incident report. However, it is not. Needless to say, that's questionable procedure. And included in this report is a page of credentials attempting to indicate how highly qualified and competent this individual was in investigating accidents of this nature. Now, providing that information is a double-edged sword. If this person is that competent, trains other officers, is used in civil matters as an expert witness, the question is, how do you get these things wrong? And you see as I proceed in showing these pictures, how do you get these things wrong? And one has to come to the belief that if you're so highly skilled and competent and there are so many errors, that there is intent there. Now this is looking eastbound. This is the direction of travel that both of them were going. And there's not much to see in this picture, and that's kind of the point. Because this paint can is later going to be used to mark on the road an area where they believe the left tire was. As you can see from this picture, there are no clear tire marks, skid marks. Now mind you, the road was a bit damp. Based upon what Mrs. Gonzalez indicated. Now, what's of real significance in this photo is this mark right here. This is a liquid. You see a splash here, and then it goes across the road in the direction that PJ ended up, lying across the road, back in this area here. Let me bring this out. Okay. And you can see in this far off shot, you see the bike here, and it's in this area that PJ was laying. Head close to this yellow line. It's our belief that his feet were in this direction here. Now, the significance of that bike being in that area, I'm going to make clear to you in a moment. This is another picture showing that splash. It's believed that that was a bottle of water PJ had in his hand. And upon contact, there was a splash, and then the bottle flew across the road in the same direction that PJ went. Here's a closer photo. This is PJ's do-rag, close to the line. Now you can see that they've made the mark to indicate the left front tire of the vehicle. Now these marks here, this is liquid splash. This isn't skid mark. That's from oil, transmission fluid, something of that nature. And I believe some of the other pictures are clear. You can see that because it continues straight. It is not relevant in this case. Again, no obvious skid marks here. Now, there are some faint lines here. I want you to keep in mind that it had been raining, and so these are tire marks that have nothing to do with this incident, because as you'll see, if you can't see in this picture, you'll see in subsequent pictures. Maybe you can see it in this area here. When you're driving at a relatively high rate of speed, in this case 51 miles per hour, and you make an abrupt turn, the edge of your tire rolls, and on that edge the tire skids a bit laterally from the inertia of the car, the momentum, and then it skids a bit. And that's what you'll see here, is the roll of that tire as he changed direction and he went towards that wall. Here's a brighter picture. Again, there's no clear obvious skid marks by this tire, so how they determine that this specific area is related to the contact point, and that's what's important. Now, it's possible to extrapolate that if this is the left front tire, then this is where that began. But the roll of the tire, the lateral roll of the tire, would be on the outer edge of that front tire. The outer edge is here. This is the inner edge. And so the outer edge, if that's if this is the tract of the tire, then the outer edge should be here. But as you can see, that's the left front tire. Then it's clear to see that this was the left. I would have placed the right over here, and this would have been the contact point, which would have been on the passenger side of the vehicle. That's a clearer picture of that outer edge of that tire, the roll leaving that mark and going towards the wall that he went through. Now there's a brighter look, and you can see all the, splatter from oil, transmission fluid, because typically cars, left tire here, right tire there, so this is typically the underside of the car where liquids such as transmission fluid, antifreeze, and oil might come onto the road. But you can see the roll of that tire here, left front tire, and this is the outer edge, and this is the area that we believe is the contact point. Let me go back to that one. Now there you can see the splash going around. Now again, here, this is what we believe to be that outer edge of that tire. And what you see here is, you can see as the car is starting to turn clockwise, you'll see the front tire and the rear tire. And they're not in line with each other because the vehicle is starting to turn clockwise. And it is the same here. Inside of front tire, back tire. This is the wall, this area here. This is the wall that he went through, the vehicle went through. Now to have this many photographs showing that bike on that side of the road, these photographs are taken as evidence for anyone that would review this accident, the accident report and the photographs. You put those together to tell a story of what happened this night. For that bike to be on that side of the street would lead one to believe that that's where the bike was. And the records indicate that nothing is further from the truth. Phoenix Police Department were the first to arrive. They contacted Maricopa County Sheriff's Department when they determined that this dark, unincorporated area with no streetlights was actually Maricopa County. So the first officer of the Sheriff's Department that arrived, this is his narrative. On November 3rd, 2015, at approximately 20:48 hours, that's 8:48, I responded to the area of 70th Avenue and Lower Buckeye Road in reference to a report of a vehicle accident involving injuries. While en route, I was advised that there were individuals fighting because someone was trying to leave the scene. I was also advised the vehicle was in the complainant's yard. And of note, when they photograph the inside of the vehicle, the gear shift is in a reverse position. Upon my arrival, I noticed Phoenix Police Department was on the scene, and they were blocking east and westbound traffic on Lower Buckeye Road, just east and west of 70th Avenue. They also had 70th Avenue blocked off from traffic traveling northbound onto Lower Buckeye Road. Now, northbound is this way. That's one of the streets that they had blocked off. Okay. I noticed that there was a bicycle lane in the eastbound lane of Lower Buckeye Road. This is the eastbound lane. This is west, This is east. This is the south side, and this is the north side. The bicycle had severe damage to it. I also noticed a gray 2004 Dodge four-door sedan that was in the yard. The sedan was extremely damaged, along with a small wall and fence. There were multiple individuals standing around the vehicle and on the south shoulder of Lower Buckeye Road where the bicycle was. South side, not the north side, and not in the westbound lane. I spoke with Phoenix Police Department, who told me that there were not any witnesses and the bicycle was in the same place as when they arrived. Now, the reason that this is so concerning is because when the detective that was assigned to this incident wrote his report, he stated, on November 3rd, 2015, at approximately 2042, Traffic Unit 1, a gray unknown make and model bike ridden by Paul D. Robinson was traveling eastbound on Lower Buckeye Road, approximately 175 feet west of 70th Avenue. Okay. Also on this same page of interest is where they stated, page 17, where they stated that he had died on the 9th, and that's the day before I met with him. Also on the same page was that the driver of the car was tested and found not to be impaired for drugs or alcohol, and then they end this paragraph by stating that PJ was impaired. That's information that they would have gotten from the hospital. On page 18, he states, physical evidence found at the scene in the form of a scuff mark in the eastbound lane of Lower Buckeye, 4 feet north of the south fog line and 177 feet west of the curb of 70th Avenue. Tire marks found on the front bumper of the vehicle indicate Robinson was riding near the center of the eastbound lane of travel when the collision occurred. And then they quote statutes to indicate that PJ was at fault. I'm looking for the specific page where they indicate. Let me see. Okay. Page 4 of this detective's report indicated, I checked the roadway and found the traffic vehicle 1, a gray 15-speed bicycle, laying in the westbound lane of Lower Buckeye, approximately 3.5 feet north of the center line. How does someone that skilled get that wrong? They would, in this report, also indicate that the bike was moved to facilitate the paramedics. However, PJ was in this area, and the bike was found over here. The bike wasn't in the way to begin with. And even so, if the bike was moved to facilitate care of PJ, then before you start taking pictures, you should know, this first officer should know who says, the Phoenix Police Department says the bike was on the south side and it hadn't been moved, so that officer should know the approximate area where that bike was. And before you start taking evidentiary photos, you put that bike in that area again so that Subsequent review of this information makes clear where the bike was. I mean, when you're trying to determine the direction of travel of the bike, direction of travel of the car, contact points, such things as, PJ had a large contusion on his left side. So if PJ, if the car hits PJ directly on, he pushes him forward. If he makes contact on an angle, which we believe is consistent with these photographs, then he pushes the bike around to the left side, in which case his left thigh makes contact. These are things that if you look at read the report and you look at these pictures, you should be able to determine. But it is the narrative and these pictures are inconsistent with the final outcome that they considered exceptionally clear. Again, you can see debris here from the vehicle, indicating the amount of force in the impact. Now, some of these pictures can be a little upsetting. I know they're upsetting for his mother, and it might be upsetting for some of you, but it's important to get this information out because we are unable here in Phoenix to get any type of consideration for reopening this, reinvestigating this, and bringing charges against this individual. So it must be shown. This is where PJ's head made contact. He had a do-rag on. It's my belief that the roughness of the asphalt pulled the do-rag off his head, and this is blood here, so it would indicate his head was here and his feet were in this direction. Again, the pictures of this bike to indicate that the bike was on the north side in the westbound lane. I want you to take note of the convex shape of this wheel, or concave indent, okay? This curve here in the rim of the left back tire. That was his cell phone. The Gonzalez has indicated that there were a couple of people that were coming westbound, and that included the nurse. There was a couple that picked up the phone, tried to turn it on to try to get any identifying information about PJ. So it's not as if that phone was not moved, but yet it stayed right there by the bike. Again, you see that indentation. That would be consistent with contact with the bumper. Now, I want to take a moment to, as I've already mentioned, the speed limit was 40 miles an hour. It was dark. It had been raining. And regardless of the speed limit, if you go into a dark area and it's been raining, it's prudent for you to slow down. Especially if your headlights are off. And that's called speed unreasonable or imprudent for conditions. That in itself warranted a ticket. Records would also indicate that he didn't have a seat belt on along with um, the fact that um, his headlights were off. Now, in this report, there is, it's called the Arizona Crash Report, and it has the ID number along with the date and time of the accident. It has condition influencing driver or cyclist, and it is marked yes for PJ, for drugs, and no for the driver, no apparent influence. And in this case, you would think it would be prudent to be definitive in determining if this person was impaired. He struck somebody from behind. He was speeding. He didn't have his headlights on. So at the very least, he was inattentive. They made no attempt to check his cell phone to determine if he was on the phone at the time that he was driving. But also, there was another note here. Now, where it says no test given, both boxes are blank. Where it has tests given, it's only marked for PJ. There is no mark to indicate tests given, tests refused, or testing unknown. The only box that is marked is for PJ. Now that didn't happen until he went to the hospital. But again, they want to slant this and clear it by making PJ be responsible for this. Under violations and behavior, they mark no improper action for the driver of the car. For PJ, they marked knowingly operated with faulty or missing equipment. Now, what they're referring to is the fact that, was there a headlight on the bike? No. But the headlight would have been pointed in the opposite direction. Was there a reflector on the bike laying on the ground there from the picture? No. Is there a bracket for that reflector? Yes. Could the car, in making contact with the bike, knock the reflector off? Yes. The pedals had reflectors. He had on kind of a neon tennis shoes. He also had on a light gray hoodie. Now, when I spoke to the Sheriff's Department on the 10th of November, and they were trying to lead me to believe that PJ was at fault, they said that there were no reflectors and he was wearing dark clothes. But they didn't mention the light gray sweater. Why? They mentioned no reflectors, but they didn't mention that the headlight switch was in the off position. And that's significant, and I'll show you in the other pictures, because the battery compartment was destroyed, which I believe would have closed or opened that circuit, in which case there wouldn't have been any power to the lights anyway. It's my belief that that circuit has to be closed even if the battery is not charged for power from the alternator, if the motor is still running. And also later I will share with you about my attempt to see the vehicle. It was supposedly taken to the tow yard, and it was my hope to verify the matter of the headlights by looking at the driver's side headlight was destroyed. The passenger side headlight was intact. Now these are investigators. This is their job. It supposedly was a closed off scene where nothing was contaminating the scene or the evidence. Even though that left headlight was broken out, they should have been able to find the inner portion in the bulb of that light, because if the car is energized, if the headlights are on, and those sealed headlights, if oxygen gets in there, then the filament and breaks, or actually it burns through due to the exposure to oxygen. That would have helped them to determine if the headlights were on. But that is not something that they did. Let me get back to this report. Yeah, at the location of cyclists, they put for PJ in roadway. I also want to mention under violations. They didn't mark, they marked for PJ under no improper action, the box is blank for PJ. For the driver of the car, it's marked no improper action. It was not marked for this driver, speed too fast for conditions. It was not marked exceeded lawful speed, followed too closely, or failure to yield the right of way. They did everything to make PJ appear to be the guilty party. The driver of the car, to them, was the victim. Now, under a page called Fatal Supplement, and it says, completed if any driver is tested for alcohol or drugs. Now they have the driver 1 is PJ, and then there's driver 2, that's the car. Under PJ, they have under drug test type number 2 and drug test results number 2. Under the driver of the car, they have under alcohol test type a 0. Under alcohol test results, it's blank. Under drug test type, there's a 0. Under drug test results, it's blank. Now, what would you make of that? A drug test would either be saliva, blood, or urine. And that wasn't done. As a matter of fact, there was an independent article written about bicyclists that have been injured or killed here in Arizona. And this individual makes note of the fact that the driver was not tested, in spite of what they say. Now, the question is, does this reflect incompetence, or is this an attempt to stage this? That was photo showing that bracket. You see, this is a bracket that we believe was holding that reflector that they failed to find. And again, just as in the report by the Goldwater Institute, you know, being lazy is no excuse. I also want to indicate that they went to the hospital to try to identify PJ. Apparently he didn't have his wallet on him, so they couldn't identify him. And we have every reason to believe that they believe that he was Hispanic, and that the hospital had, at the hospital, The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office Crime Lab checked his fingerprints and they were not in the database. So we believe that to them was kind of a confirmation that he was an illegal, and that's why his fingerprints were not in the system. And on page 2 is what's called a response to the call. He indicates that Sergeant Taylor told him that a drug recognition expert was responding to the scene to evaluate the driver for signs and symptoms of impairment. But that is not the extent of their responsibilities as drug recognition experts. Any officer can do that. How many times have we seen them either do the breathalyzer or check for, nystagmus, the changes in their eyes when they give them commands to follow their fingers and things like that. Any officer can do that. But a drug recognition expert does other tests, and I mentioned the 12-step process as indicated in these national protocols, and that should be documented, and that documentation should be available. On page 14, it indicates speed calculations. They indicate 51.3 miles per hour. Where's the ticket? Headlights, speeding, from behind, he should have been arrested at the scene. And typically the individual is detained, if not arrested, before a drug recognition expert gets involved. I'm looking at the case status clearance report here, and it's not cleared by arrest, but it's marked exceptionally cleared. Unfounded is not marked, inactive is not marked, recoded is not marked, and pending is not marked. At the very least, this should have been kicked up to the county attorney's office for further investigation and possible charges, but it wasn't. And that is very concerning for us because it's not even consistent with the manner in which, now this might be a little disturbing to some. Now this is looking back westbound, and as you can see here, that vehicle of the friend is no longer there. Now what was the purpose of that friend's vehicle being there? And what was the purpose of the driver going and getting in that vehicle? You have to keep in mind that if this individual is not searched and detained in a squad car, and there's no indication that he was searched and found that he had no weapons or drugs, paraphernalia, anything like that on him, that he walks to this vehicle, he gets in that vehicle, and anything that he takes out of his pockets and puts into that vehicle, it requires a separate search warrant. But that vehicle's gone now. Now what kind of police work is that? And why did that vehicle come to the scene? Now the Gonzaleses would tell us later that a vehicle pulled up, and they indicated that a woman wearing a meter maid type of blue top and a guy that looked like a undercover detective came to the scene and consoled the driver. Later pictures will show another man along with the family at the vehicle, along with a suspicious briefcase. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Again, we're looking westbound, and I guess you can see that mark, that roll of the tires, a little bit there. That's a closer view. Now in later pictures, you're going to see where they attempt to lead us to believe that contact with the bike is here. And once you see these other pictures, you're going to see how obvious it is that this is staged. Now this is the mark that they want us to believe is where the contact was made. It appears that it might be from a rubber tire, yeah. Oh, let me go back. This is the battery compartment. And as you can see, it appears on this edge there's no cable contact on that side of the battery. And you can see that the light is destroyed, but this is the area here of interest which they should have been looking at to determine if that filament was broken off or if it burned off. That would have indicated whether or not those headlights were on. Again, there's a close-up view. They would later mark that off to be between 16 and 18 inches from that left front tire. And that's how they're going to determine the position of the bike in the roadway. Now this is where they indicate PJ possibly hit, where his head hit. And that's possible, but it's not consistent with being in line with that left front tire, as if he hit him direct on the passenger side. As you can see, the vehicle was extremely damaged. This is part of the roadway, the brick wall that he went through here. As you can see, the trunk is open, and it's my belief you're not required to get a warrant if the trunk is unlocked or it's open to go into it. I could be wrong, but that's my belief. Now this is a picture showing family members going through the vehicle. That's the driver. Now if these are evidentiary photos, and this has the possibility of being vehicular manslaughter, something like that, where you believe that the person that you struck could die, how is it that you're taking the pictures with these people going through the vehicle? That doesn't make any sense to me. It would seem like it would be important that you photograph everything untouched. Again, because down the road, if for any reason this has to be reviewed, these pictures imply that the scene is contaminated. Again, that shows one we believe could be the driver, and in the subsequent picture you'll see the other individual. Here they're bringing they're making a point of the fact that the seat belt is in a position after the airbag is going off that clearly indicates that the seat belt was not being worn. On page 11, the driver told him that he was wearing a seat belt. At the conclusion of the interview, I inspected vehicle 2 and found the seat belt locked in the retracted position. I told the driver, based upon my inspection of the vehicle, I didn't think he was wearing his seat belt. He said, I thought I was. This car flipped over. This car went through a wall and flipped over. I mean, you clearly know if you had your seat belt on. But this indicates that this driver would lie to get out of a ticket for not wearing a seat belt. So what else would he lie about? Page 19 would indicate hours of darkness and no street lights. Five, indicating that he was in the vehicle of a friend. That's him making a clear, the photographer making a clear point of the fact that the seatbelt was not being worn. I mean, who gets a pass under these circumstances, and it's clear that the seatbelt wasn't on, at the very least? You know, this is beyond us. That picture shows that it's in the reverse position, not in the park, which would be consistent with the homeowner saying or trying to make sure that he didn't leave the scene. Now, what would have given him that impression? Now, if he's just sitting in the car and he's moaning, shook up, trying to clear his head, that's one thing. But there had to be a reason for that homeowner to want to make sure that he didn't leave. It's quite possible that putting it in reverse was his attempt. In that picture there, you can also see that it was a single key, and it was a key not on a key ring. This was a vehicle owned by him and his mother. And the headlight switch, according to his report, page 8, the turn signal mounted headlight switch was turned to the off position. You know, most of us that drive cars today, you know, you put it on automatic. And when you turn the car on, your lights come on. Some of these today, newer cars, you know, the light comes on even during the day, the lights are on. Others have sensors that when it's dark, then it comes on. You put it on auto and it stays there. But if, and the car was in off position, usually in off position, the report says the ignition switch was in the off position. The battery the compartment was destroyed. So there should have been no clear reason to turn this to the off position, because the light shouldn't have been on at that point anyway. Whether it was the battery compartment being destroyed or the ignition switch being turned to the off position, which would have stopped the alternator, then the lights would have been off anyway. Yeah, I hope I got that right. Okay, another picture of the seat belt, you know, air freshener, gum wrappers, dominoes. The driver makes a point of saying he hadn't had anything to drink in 2 weeks, and he said he had 7.5 hours of rest. He had left his home at 9:15, had to be, no, at 8:15. Had to be to work at 9 o'clock. Now he was going to 67th Avenue and then north to McDowell. But I checked on MapQuest from 70th Avenue and Lower Buckeye to his destination, which was a Fry's on 27th Avenue and Bell Road. And according to the MapQuest, it was 31 miles. So he was going to stop. Now that the incident took place between 8:30 8:40. He was going to stop to pick up an individual on 67th and McDowell, which was probably, I'd say, 3-4 miles from this area, and then make it 31 miles to his job in 30 minutes. But he was in a bit of a hurry. He would also indicate that he was picking up his boss, and his boss didn't mind him being late. Now, you're part of a crew doing repairs, and I went up to a Fry's that was having these repairs done. They usually start doing them between 9 and 10 p.m., and the store usually closes around 12 or so, but they'll start in one area and they'll work through as they remodel it. But if you're the boss of a crew, I would think you're there before your crew gets there. Anything to the contrary doesn't make any sense. I mean, who would have a boss that gets there after his employees? Maybe that's just my opinion. Okay, again, you see the water bottles, dominoes. Now this is the mark that they would put on the road to indicate where contact with the bike was. Now there's a little line here, but there are little lines everywhere on the road. And you'll see as we move forward here why that's staged. Okay, back to the bike. And I might have to pull out the photo if it's not in this group to show you this individual who I believe was a friend. This is a black male that was also by the vehicle. This shows the 16 to 18 inches that they used to mark that area from the left front tire on the road there. As you can see here, this is what they want us to believe is the contact point for the bike. There again, they're demonstrating the distance from the tire to the mark on the bumper. Now, hope you notice that all the damage here is, the majority of the damage here is done on the driver's side. However, going westbound, the outer edge of the vehicle, which is the passenger side, you would believe would make contact with the wall first. But yet the majority of the damage here is on the driver's side. So unless this vehicle turned all the way around on that dirt, something is missing. Now this is where they want to indicate was the mark from PJ's tire. You know, it is my belief through this whole process that there is a culture of acting with impunity here, where they don't believe that things are going to be questioned, and maybe they're not in the habit of people questioning. I mean, because they build the narratives, they have the control over that. And I believe also that African Americans here, and probably quite often people of color, Hispanics, do not question authority. And that's gone on so long that they do anything just to cover their butts, and they'll build the narrative to their liking, and then, you know, move on to the next thing. But PJ was a very special individual. He was very well loved, and he was our son. And so that's not acceptable. Now this is the driver's phone, and it's good we have these pictures so that subsequent investigation can be made, even if there must be a warrant, in order to determine if this individual was on the phone. Who knows? Calling his boss, texting his boss, saying, hey, I'm running late, something of that nature. And it's important. I wonder if I went past some pictures. That's another story. Here's PJ. This picture is showing the speed limit. This shows the contusion on PJ's left side. Now I'm going to have to go back to a picture in a minute, or I'm going to have to just show the picture of a suspicious briefcase that an individual, whether it was his mother or sister or somebody, was holding next to the vehicle. Now he does construction work or remodeling at a grocery store. There was a black briefcase and a fourth person, and then him and this other person are in a vehicle that comes into a closed crime scene that he's allowed to go to before being interviewed by the detective versus being in a squad car and detained. You have to piece it together for yourself. All right, in this picture, and I wonder what happened to my magnifier here. But I have to bring this out in this picture. Right there. Let me give you a moment to think about that. Take a look at that. And see what conclusion you might come to. Now remember, with the liquid in the road, with the tire mark, the edge of the left front tire, the position of the liquid in relationship to the passenger side. And remember the indent on the frame, the rim of the back tire. That curvature fitting right around this bumper. The fact that PJ had a contusion on the left side. He was hit. The bike twisted counterclockwise. The front tire came around to that 8-inch area, making that the front tire, not the back. PJ went up this direction, hit his head here, went off to the left, which would have put him back over here, and the bike continued forward in the direction of the car, being on the south side of the street. The question is, how does he miss that? Clearly, that's rubber. Clearly, that's rubber. Left eye contusion hitting the bumper. Look, if he was hit here, the back tire was hit here, and the bike went counterclockwise, then he would have went off to the left and never made contact with the hood, with the front of the vehicle. Now he had no He had no broken arms, no broken legs, no broken fingers. He did have a fractured pelvis. So clearly, that was from the impact of the car, not from the road. The contusions he had above his left eye and right eye clearly indicate that when you look at the blood mark on the road, when he hit the road, he went maybe a foot and came the rest. And this is even hard for me to say. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next picture. Okay, that's my point. Contact, pulls off the do-rag, head hits here. He comes to land this side, feet this direction. See, from this, it would lead you to believe that because they believe the do-rag's on the top of your head, then the do-rag must represent the top of the head, meaning his feet were this direction. That doesn't make sense. Nylon hits the road, which is rough. You're going in a particular direction. That snags on the roughness of the road, pulling that off, and clearly there was no do-rag when there was bleeding on the road. Okay, there's the two family members. Again, going through the vehicle. One is believed to be the mother, and the other is believed to be the sister. They're in most of the picture of this vehicle. Now, I'm going to have to go back here a ways. And if the picture's not in this group, then I have the picture here by me. Oh, that was it. Here. I want to draw attention to this black briefcase. Now, in the report, this first sheriff that was on the scene, at the end of his report, he indicates that he was told to fill out a tow sheet. And in the record, it appears that there was a tow sheet done by the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department. And it was due to a crash. However, the record also shows that there was a second tow sheet done. This tow sheet on this tow sheet, the second one, the one not done by this sheriff, that was the first one there, this Officer Chavez. In this one it says, it indicates the insurance company, Geico. It indicates that the vehicle is being released to be repaired. I doubt this is going to be repaired. By order of parents. Now you're going to do an investigation. You've told an officer to have it impounded and towed away. And then you release the vehicle to the parents and the insurance company the following day. You see, after I spoke with the Maricopa Sheriff's Department on the 10th and brought up the questions about the left light and whether or not it was energized, like the headlight was on at the time he hit PJ, I went to Western Towing, and to my surprise, they indicated that the vehicle was released the following day. Now, I would think that if you're trying to determine if this person was criminally negligent for life-threatening injuries to a bicyclist, you would impound the vehicle pending further investigation. You can't investigate it once you release it. So again, you see they're allowing them to go through the vehicle here. They're very casual with this. And it's our belief that they were so casual because they believe PJ, unfortunately, look, this is the culture. This is the nature of things here. That he was an illegal alien, and there was just this total indifference. And I don't believe it would have been much different if they believed he was African American. I mean, that they didn't find out until the following day. I mean, during my meeting with them, they stated that they had came to my house and I wasn't here. They indicated that a neighbor told them that a Hispanic man lived there. So I think all of this was consistent with their belief and their actions, and also the fact that they had found a piece of paper in his pocket, had a girl's name on it to call the girl, and me and PJ I bought PJ to Phoenix. I bought him here because I was having a lot of health issues, and I came here. My sisters are here, and I ended up moving kind of out far away from them. One sister in Tempe, the other one in Central Phoenix. So I'm out here, and probably to 30 miles from them as well. But it was an opportunity for me and my son to bond, to get to know each other again, and for him to be helpful to me during periods. I'm a disabled veteran and totally disabled, and I have bad periods that I'm bedridden. And there was an opportunity for him to help me, for us to help each other. And so we had a disagreement, and he left to go to a girl's house, and he was apparently there for 3 or 4 days. I didn't know this girl, and I didn't know the nature of the situation. But with this one with the phone number, he had told her that he was homeless. He didn't have anywhere to go. Well, he was playing on a sympathy because he wanted to stand up to me, and he didn't want to go along with and it's difficult to say, but fathers got to be fathers. And, my age, my experience, the things that I've went through, I needed to show him a better way. And he was resistant to that. And that led to him telling this girl, I believe, that he was homeless so he could get with her. I was that age once, and the games we played. But anyway, so the sheriff's department got to believing that he was homeless, but nonetheless they believed also that there was no one that was going to speak for him. And even after I met with him, they still got the fact that he didn't pass away until December 1st wrong, and simply put on the 9th. When you consider what they offered as an accident report and the substance of it and the inconsistencies with the pictures, and it clearly states, it makes you wonder. Well, it definitely should make you concerned with what type of representation you're getting from your law enforcement, and in this case, the sheriff. Now, I'm going to have to, it's significant, so I'm going to have to find this other picture. Okay, now this is going to be hard to see. I don't know if you have the ability to, and it should have been included on this. Let me bring it up to the camera. Here. Down to the left. Now hopefully you can see that there are two people in that picture. One is the driver and one is the friend. And that picture should have been in that group of photos. But for some reason it wasn't. So again, I just want to reiterate that PJ was hit on this side of the vehicle. He was close by that fog line, and he was avoiding that rocky shoulder, probably 3 feet to the right of that. And I hope you'll keep in mind as well that reflectors are irrelevant if there's nothing to reflect. There were no overhead lights, and the driver's headlights were off. There's other point I want to make too, and that's where that center line, the center turn lane ends. Going westbound, the road stays straight. Going eastbound, there's a slight left curve, very slight, maybe 5 to 10 degrees. It should have been measured by them, but they were indifferent to it. So if you fail to make that adjustment, I'm going to try to go to this picture. As you can see in this picture here, you can see how it's narrowing, but it's not affecting this side. This side stays straight all the way through 70th and 80th, up to 75th. And then, there's a slight change as it goes further down the road. But here, this side of the road goes slightly northeast. So if you fail to make that adjustment, you will go from being centered in this road on 70th to slightly going this direction. This would be straight. Not straight on down this road this way. It's consistent with this line here. But if you were going straight, and I have it on my phone, but I don't have it on here, you would go over and cross this line. And this is where PJ was hit. Passenger side bumper. He then turned clockwise. Left thigh hit the grill of the car. And as the car went off this direction, PJ was thrown here. And the bike ended up over here. Totally inconsistent with these photos. I mean, this has just been one indication of why we were angry and concerned, and we turned that into determination. When we were unable to get any type of response or interest from the county attorney's office, We contacted the mayor's office. We contacted the attorney general's office, this being the capital of Phoenix, and they were patronizing and dismissive. We contacted the Department of Justice Criminal Division in Washington. They were dismissive. I met with an FBI agent here. Essentially, what we got back from that was that they didn't see anything that they could do in this matter. They didn't see any wrongdoing. And we went to the media, the television stations here. I mean, we see all kind of stories on TV about dogs that on TV and in print. We found where there was a dog named Zero who was hit by a car, and white Phoenicians were able to get the sheriff's department to reopen an investigation. How do you think that makes us feel? You'll reopen an investigation into the death of a dog, but not of a young black man. Any contact with the county attorney's office by, I don't know, they sent out some guy who said he was an investigator. It's very unclear who this person was, but he was not a representative of the county attorney's office. He was not assistant county attorney or anything like that. And he would indicate that the sheriff's department has got to kick it upstairs. And I asked him about, what is this summary judgment thing in this matter when a person's life is put at risk, or as they indicated that it was a fatality. Why wouldn't they kick it up to county attorney's office to make sure that everything was done to make sure that this was a legitimate accident and there was no wrongdoing or liability on the part of the driver? And also, just to show some respect for PJ and for us as grieving parents. But there's indifference. They don't care. And we've taken documentation along with photographs and things like that to the TV stations, and they don't call us back. I mean, you can't even get in the door in this place. I mean, everything is just on lockdown. And as far as one of these news stations, you couldn't get past the gate. So you couldn't talk to anybody directly. You just had to pass it to one person, to pass it to another person. But be that as it may, to have more interest in the welfare of a dog and not of a black man is extremely troubling. We went to the One Black newspaper here, and I met with them 3 times. Never called me back. I went to one of the large churches here to let them know maybe they can get the information out to their parishioners. I mean, how do you get information out to the black community here if it's not the One Black newspaper? And the white media will not do a story on these things. They'll do things to vilify blacks, but no response to this. And that's why we're doing this video. And the second part of this video is going to be about the treatment of our son at Phoenix Hospital here. And there should actually be 3 parts, because I've gone through the same thing that's put my health in jeopardy and over the last 8 months, and it's interfered with my ability to pursue this matter. We've met with attorneys, and it's essentially been dismissed, partially because the first attorney we had misled us. I mean, they're very good with the personal injury thing here, but I'm having a difficult time finding any record of blacks putting forth medical malpractice suits in this town. A couple of attorneys expressed the concern that a jury of peers here would be predominantly white and Hispanic and not black, and it would be difficult to get white individuals to go up against or to bring a decision contrary to bringing decision in favorable of African American plaintiffs. Just the fact that we went to the state bar on this attorney that took our case, knew that it was my interest. I met with him, was medical malpractice and wrongful death. They had us fill out a personal injury agreement, and then waited until our son was deceased for 6 days to tell us they don't do medical malpractice. Well, they clearly knew that. That was our interest. And, they indicated, oh, well, we'll change this. Doctor said they didn't expect him to live, so, well, when he passes, then we could go to a wrongful death and a medical malpractice suit. So they knew that. They knew what our intentions were, but clearly their intent was to get the quick money, and then they hindered our ability to get representation, if not prejudicing us from getting that representation by waiting 6 days after and then having to split any contingency fees between two different law firms, whereas the second law firm, which would do a wrongful death and medical malpractice, would incur more costs. So therefore, they would have preferred to have done the personal injury, so all of the money of the contingency fees would have went to them, and they would have used that money for medical experts. Absent that, and the jury of the peers issues and other things, we were unable to get representation. So I was attempting to do that. I wasn't going to let this go. But then when I was mistreated in the hospitals, misdiagnosed, had a ruptured appendix, failed surgery, I have had difficulty pursuing this. But even in poor health, I am not going to let this go. We're not going to let this go. And we ask for your help. There needs to be an investigation. It is our belief, and you'll see as the story unfolds about what happened at the hospital and the contempt and disrespect and just a lack of concern by some to try to save his life. Odds are very good that this has happened in the past. And unless this is brought to light, odds are very good that this will happen in the future. And this country is a sum of all its parts. Arizona was the last to allow Martin Luther King's birthday to be celebrated as a holiday. There's been clear articles, and maybe not as many as possible, of the racism here, and by kids. Kids don't have the filter that adults in government and offices of authority have. They're very cognizant of the fact that you can't outwardly show racism, otherwise legal action can be brought, so they control it. But these kids get it from somebody. And so I hope you will view the second part of this video. God bless you, and thanks.